What's up, reality students? Guys, we are so excited. We are in our second week of this series called Virtues. A few things before we get started tonight. We want to let you guys know that on our Instagram, we are going to be posting stuff every week, probably throughout the week. And we have some activities coming up. So make sure you guys are staying on that and keeping updated with what we have going on our Instagram. As well as we want to know how we can be praying for you guys. And so please text us or email us or even direct message us on Instagram. We would love to know how Jake and myself can be praying for you as well as your small group leaders. But hey guys, buckle in. We are going to hear from Jake tonight in our second week of Virtues.
What's up, reality students? How you guys doing? I hope you are all staying safe and inside and not getting too bored with the coronavirus stuff. My name is Jake. I'm one of the youth pastors here. Guys, we miss you so much, but welcome to week 3 of online youth group. As Jordy said earlier, we're on week 2 of a series that we're calling Virtues, where we're looking at Old Testament characters and just kind of looking at virtues that they exhibit, that if we can learn from that and follow their example, man, it could change our lives for the better. But the thing about this series, kind of like any other series, this stuff doesn't really matter unless we can apply it to our lives and kind of put it into action. It doesn't matter if I agree that serving other people or showing hospitality or whatever it is a good thing unless I do it. And I think that that's especially true about what we're talking about today. And it's this virtue called generosity. And I wonder if you could think maybe as you're sitting here watching this, have you ever had somebody do something for you or maybe give you something and you're like, wow, that was really generous? Have you ever had that before? I remember it was my sophomore year at Nebraska Christian College. I was actually interning here at Reality Church under a guy named Travis Carson. He was our middle school guy before me. And I just remember there was a day I had to take my van. I had a 2002 Chrysler Town & Country, a real piece of crap, really. But anyways, this car was had 200,000 miles on it, not a really reliable vehicle, but I had to take it in to get worked on. I think something was wrong with the starter or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but I took it in, and I get a phone call from the auto mechanic place, and they say, yeah, your van's ready, and oh, by the way, it's going to cost you $485 or something crazy like that. I don't know. When you're a broke college kid, though, and you don't really have a job, you're not making any money, that's a lot. That is a lot, and I was really stressed out about it. But it was really only for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, because right after he said that, he said, well, it did cost $485, but actually, your bill just got paid by a guy named Travis Carson. And it just kind of that moment was one of those for me where I was like, wow, he totally didn't have to do that. He knew that I would never be able to repay him. There was no way. I couldn't afford that. I was a broke college kid. But he did it anyways, and what that did for me in that moment was it made me feel really cared for one. But two, it took a ton of stress off of my chest. And I share that story because I think that when it comes to generosity, when other people are generous to us, we love it. It makes us feel cared for, it makes us feel loved, all of that kind of stuff. But when it comes to us being generous for other people, well, then we've got a whole lot of excuses why we can't do that. Maybe we don't have any money. Maybe we don't see the need. Or maybe we feel like we see the need, but we feel like somebody else is going to take care of that. Or we just don't feel like we have anything to offer. For whatever reason, we can come up with all sorts of excuses why we shouldn't be or can't be generous. But what if for today, what if we could change that? What if we could learn to be generous and live this lifestyle, really, of generosity? Is there any value to that? And if so, what could it be? What could that do for us and for our lives? There's a place in Scripture, in the Old Testament, a character by the name of Elisha. And Elisha is this Old Testament prophet. And really, he's a really fascinating character, one of my favorites in the Bible. But there's a moment in his life where he's presented with a problem that honestly, he didn't really have to do anything about this. It wasn't his responsibility per se, but he he responded to it in a way that I think is really good. So let's take a look at it today. It's 2 Kings chapter 4, starting in verse 1. Here's how it goes. One day, the widow of a member of the group of the prophets came to Elisha and cried out, "My husband who served you is dead, and you know how he feared the Lord. But now a creditor has come, threatening to take my 2 sons as slaves." So here's this woman who had been married to somebody that Elisha had worked with. And she's saying, yeah, hey, you knew my husband, you knew the kind of man he was, the kind of family we were, but he's gone. I'm a widow now, and there's this creditor, this debt that I owe that I can't pay. I don't have the money for it. And this guy is threatening to take my 2 sons as slaves. It's kind of a mess for her right now. It kind of reminds me of a place that my mom maybe was in when my dad passed away, where there's just all of this debt that comes with that. And there's no real way for her to pay that. That's her situation. It's really, really stressful for her. And this is how Elisha responds to it. Verse 2. "What can I do to help you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" She says, "Nothing at all except a flask of olive oil." But I love this first thing that Elisha says. The first thing out of his mouth is not, well, you should have, been saving money or been planning for this. No, he says, "What can I do to help? How can I help you?" And this is so simple, but so profound. What he's doing right here is he's making himself her servant. How can I serve you? What can I do to help you? And then he asks, I imagine in this moment, he's not just asking her, he's also asking himself, how can I serve her? And then he asks this question, tell me, what do you have in the house? What do you have just laying around? She says, just a little bit of olive oil. And I've got to think that in Elijah's mind, he's like, oh, perfect, I can work with this. And so he ends up telling her to do something that honestly, if this was me, this would be really kind of weird, but this is what he says. "Borrow as many empty jars as you can from your friends and neighbors. Then go into your house with your sons and shut the door behind you. Pour olive oil from your flask into the jars, setting each one aside when it is filled." This is kind of weird, right? Here's this lady with really, honestly, not that much olive oil. And Elisha says, go to your friends and neighbors and borrow as many jars as you possibly can. And just start pouring your olive oil into these jars and set it aside once it's full. So he's assuming that these jars are going to get full. That seems kind of crazy. And it seems like one of those, why would this even happen? This doesn't really make sense. But the lady did it anyways. She did as she was told. And her sons kept bringing jars to her. And she filled one after another. Soon every container was full to the brim. "Bring me another jar," she said to one of her sons. "There aren't any more," he told her. And then the olive oil stopped flowing. So look at that. This is in the life of this lady, this is a miracle. Where she had gone to this man of God, said, here's my problem, and now all of a sudden, this thing that she had just kind of laying around the house has multiplied, and now she has tons of olive oil. Now, if that was me, I'd be like, cool, except you can't really eat olive oil. This to me, it would seem kind of useless. But this is why Elisha had her do this. When she told the man of God what had happened, he said to her, "Now sell the olive oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on whatever is left." This is huge. This is why he did it. So here's what Elisha's done. This lady brings a problem to him, and he asks her, but he also asks himself, what can I do to serve this woman? What kind of gifts, what kind of resources do I have? And he ends up using his gifts as a prophet, and one of the things that she had just kind of laying around her house to take care of this woman, to provide for her needs, and show her love and show her generosity. And granted, it didn't cost Elijah anything to do this. But the thing that I think makes it generous is that he took care of her and he did not expect her to pay back. She couldn't pay him back, but he didn't want her to. That was totally fine. His whole mindset was, I'm just going to help this woman out. I see the need that she has, and I'm going to help her. I'm going to take care of it for her. And I think that what Elisha's doing here is he's actually following his God. He's following the example that God had set for him. And what I mean by that is when we read the Old Testament, we see God dealing with the nation of Israel in a way that is very patient and very generous and very kind. And so when Elisha is met with this woman's need, he does the exact same thing. He's patient to her, he's kind to her, and he's generous. He gives her whatever it is that she needs because he knows that we have a God who does not hold back good things from the people who love him. If there's something that is for the good of his servants, he's going to give it to us. And so Elisha, when he sees this need, he just looks, how can I use my gifts to serve her? And then he freely gives that. And I think of another guy a little while after Elijah who did the same thing, and his name is Jesus, right? Jesus came in and lived the life that we couldn't live and took our place on the cross, something he didn't have to do. The bottom line here, guys, if you take nothing from this besides this, please take this. It's this. Our God gives freely, so should we. Our God gives freely, and that word freely, I have it italicized in red because it's important. It's not like God gives and then he expects us to pay him back. It's not like Elijah in the story gave to this woman and said, oh, and you're going to have to give me a cut of your profit. No, it's free. It's free. There's nothing expected in return. Our God gives to us freely. So when we see needs for other people, we should be following his example by giving freely. Now, I know that we're not a prophet. We're not Elijah. We can't work miracles like that. We're not God. We're not Jesus. We can't do necessarily the same things that they did. But we can follow Elisha's example as he follows God. We can follow Jesus and his example and live a life that is generous. But how do we do that? Where would we start? And the first place is this. Look around. Look around you. What are the needs in your neighborhood right now? What are the things that maybe you could help solve? Maybe you have a neighbor who needs their yard mowed. Maybe you could do that. Maybe you got some elderly neighbors who it's not really safe for them to go to the store right now. Maybe you could do that for them. Maybe you're creative and can make crafts or do all sorts of other stuff for your neighbors. What can you do? What are the needs surrounding you? Would you look around? And I think that this is my first application point, really, because we cannot be generous if we're just focused on ourselves. One of the biggest reasons why we struggle with generosity is because it's not because we don't see needs. We see needs. We just don't see other people's needs. We see our own needs. We see the fact that I saw the fact today or yesterday that my Oreos that I had been snacking on all coronavirus, like the whole 2 weeks that we've been inside, were empty. That's a huge problem. I need more Oreos. Sad day. Right? I see the fact that I need to do my dishes or clean up around the house, but what I don't see is the needs that my neighbors have. I don't necessarily see that the lady who lives in the house over here, maybe she needs somebody to go get groceries for her. I don't see the fact that maybe there's somebody that maybe I would have said hi to when I saw them walking through the street, but nobody's actually checked up on them. Look around you. Open your eyes. Get outside of yourself. What are the needs around you? Maybe there's a kid at your school who probably nobody's checked in on just to see how they're doing. Maybe there's people who need their dogs taken care of, or their lawn mowed, or somebody to go get their groceries for them. Or maybe there's extra chores around the house now that everybody's home for a little while. What are the needs? Look around you. And then give freely of whatever you have. Maybe you don't have a lot of money right now, but maybe you do have a lot of time because you're not really in school or whatever it is. Give freely, whatever that need that you've identified as. Maybe you could go get groceries for the elderly people. Maybe you could just send a text to that kid that probably nobody's checked up on. Give freely, whatever your resources, whatever your skills, whatever your thing that you have in excess is. For a lot of us right now, it's just that we have a lot of extra time. What if you could give that freely to other people? And guys, when we do that, especially if we give it actually freely, I'm not talking about something where you give to somebody and then a couple weeks later you come back and you're like, hey, you remember that thing I did for you? I'm not talking about that. That's not actually generous. That's not giving freely. What I mean is not expecting anything in return. And when we do that, it doesn't just benefit the other person, it benefits us too. Because it's a moment in our lives where we look an awful lot like Jesus. And we're actually able to grow closer to Him and know that we're doing something for somebody else that's really good. And so I just want to challenge you guys. The next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long this coronavirus thing is going on, and really even after, what if we could start right now, today, practicing living generously, giving freely of whatever excess thing we have, whether it's time or down the road money, or maybe it's just a skill that we have, a craft that we like to do that's actually beneficial for other people. What could it look like for you to start living generous today? What are the things that you can do? What are the needs around you? What if you can meet those? Let me pray for us. God, I thank you for all of these students. Just pray that you would keep us all safe and help us to, God, show us how we can serve the community around us. God, we can't wait to meet together again. We love you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.